me to a place of humility that allowed us to heal our marriage. Philip actually shared last night a vision that he got during worship, and might have been meant for other people other than me, but I really felt like it really hit me. He said he got a vision of somebody toiling in the field, almost like one of those things that the oxen have, and they were just striving, and he felt like the Lord was just really speaking, you don't have to do that anymore. And really that's what I'm coming to learn about, is that I don't have to strive anymore. And that striving comes from growing up in a very dysfunctional household, and I had no concept of a father, neither in the spiritual sense or in the biological sense. And there was not a lot of money, so we grew up really poor, and I had that depravity mindset, and with all my mom's partying and focus on men and relationships, I really didn't feel seen at all as a child. When I was about 11, my mom remarried husband number 3, and he was the closest thing that I had to a father for a period of time. But he eventually left too when I was 15, and the message really just settled in on my heart and in my life that I'm not important, people cannot be trusted, and I cannot rely on anybody to meet my needs. If you want something done, you're going to do it yourself. And so at that point, by age 15, I was already using drugs and alcohol, but it really started to take off. My mom had gone back to work and for minimum wage, and I was left home alone. When she remarried, we had moved from Annapolis, Maryland to a farm in a small part of Pennsylvania, and so we were kind of far from everyone in town, and so I was able to freely party and experience with that kind of lifestyle. By the grace of God, at 19, though, I had an encounter with Jesus, and it was a really powerful experience, and I really felt like the Lord plucked me. There's a verse in the Bible, and I don't have it right now, but we're plucked out of just sin and just grossness is what I was living in, and just drug addiction, and for the first time in my life, when I went up for that altar call, I felt the love of a father, and I started to learn about what family was and what commitment was and what friendships were, and started to experience some healing. So I started I was living on my own at the time. I had an apartment. I was 18. I started at a community college and found the study of psychology and felt really fascinated by that, and decided that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a therapist, and I wanted to help other people who struggled with addictions and hurts like I had. And I went from like a C student in high school to really getting good grades, and that set me up for more just that accomplishment and how that felt to get, that I'm smart, and, it felt good to get these good grades. And so again, just kept striving and achieving. So I had reconnected with Derek. We had gone to high school together, and I was in between my associate's degree, and I was going to go to a Christian school in Tennessee. And I was staying at my mom's for a brief period of time before I left, and we reconnected in sin. I had really backslidden at that point in my life, but I made him my mission. I was going to save this atheist man, and I was going to get him off drugs and get him saved. Well, he went to the pastor unbeknownst to me, and because I did drag him to church a couple times, and he was going to go and talk to him about this God and this Jesus, and he ended up having an encounter with Christ in his office. So he proposed on Easter. We got married in 2003. I had just finished my bachelor's degree. 2 weeks later, we got married, and right after our honeymoon, we moved from our small town in Pennsylvania down to Baltimore. His addiction had continued, mine, we just kind of took our dysfunction and our genetics and all that, stuff with us to Baltimore, and things were really progressing. I ended up finding him overdosed while I was working on my master's degree, and I had come home early because God's timing is impeccable. Somebody pulled a false fire alarm. I'm assuming there was a drill or something, but I came home early when I wasn't supposed to be home, and I found him overdosed and gave him CPR. He went into treatment, and while in treatment, I found out that I was pregnant with my daughter, and that was in 2006 is when we had her. So I've been sober since 2006. He came home, and it was a lot of he ended up having to go to a halfway house, so we were separated once again. But some things, there's a lot of details in between that I don't have time to go into. 2008, we had our twins, which God has a sense of humor. We wanted to have our kids close together, but I didn't know 10 minutes close together. That was pretty close. So it was just a roller coaster for 6 years. But once we got to Hanover, there was a period of time where we did have some solid recovery, but then the relapse started. Derek had lost his support system, and the relapses just started getting closer and closer together. In 2016, though, I had reached the peak of my career. I had opened up a psychotherapy practice. I was an entrepreneur. I was making a lot of money, helping a lot of people. The problem is my marriage was falling apart, and I was relying back on just this independence, this striving, this seeking my identity in being an entrepreneur, and the pride was really protective, but yet pride is sinful, and it was having some devastating consequences in our marriage. So in January of 2018, we were headed for divorce, like Derek shared. I had met with an attorney. We were done. His addiction, I just didn't think that I could afford or allow myself to forgive him for where his addiction, to the depths that it had taken him. But God had other plans. So I felt very confident because of my career that I was going to make it as a single mom. I'd be okay. But in the meantime, Derek had his surrendering experience, and I was not willing to allow myself to see that the Lord was really working on his heart, because I was not going to be hurt again. I was just maintaining this focus as I'm done. We're just going to, just get this over with. I did make a bad judgment call along the way in my business, which is, again, a whole nother long story. But what it did was it humbled me. And it really took me to my knees, and it allowed Derek to be there to catch me, because I had always been the one to catch him and to support him. But now here I was, down and out, my face on the floor, crying out, just really hurting and really grieving. And that is, in that place on my knees, I cried out to the Lord, and I saw that Derek was really, really changing. He was becoming a new creation. So I started to let go of my anger, my distrust. I stopped being so critical, and actually allowed myself to see that he was fighting for our marriage, and that change was possible. So during December, around the holidays, I was working very little for about a month, and Derek had gotten a new job that month, and we realized that me being home changed the dynamic of our household. Our kids were thriving, we were communicating, things were getting done, there was no strife, there was just so much healing that was going on in December. And so we decided that the Lord was really calling me to be home. And so I closed my practice on the end of February. And meanwhile, my fear is screaming, those wounds, those old messages from childhood. Don't trust, don't be vulnerable, you can't rely on him. What about the finances? You can't afford not to work, you have to stay in control. So it's really just relinquishing control. And so then I started saying, are you sure God really said that for me to be home more? So I was in this struggle when I went on the youth retreat, and I was praying during worship time, and just really caught up in this. I was really asking God, but I had gotten an opportunity, a really good opportunity of working full time after we had decided, and we felt like the Lord was calling me to work less. And it was just a really great opportunity. And so I'm wrestling with God. Are you sure? Are you sure, God? All these women work full time, and they do ministry, and they make meals, and they take care of the kids. Why can't I? I'm capable. And the Lord, just as he does, so lovingly said, he comforted me so much. He gave me my answer, my clarity. He said, you can do all those things, but I have something better. And it was unmistakably God when I heard that. And so I realize now that there was a season for me to work hard. I did help a lot of people. It's pretty scary to think about not working full time, just financially, and relying on him, just because there's that fear of the addictions and relapse. But I'm relying on the Lord, and we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. So it took me to surrender in order to hit that place of humility and to submit to my husband, as I am called to do in Ephesians 5:22. I'm still relinquishing that fear, my distrust, my anxiety, and I now embrace my husband, and that we can fully partner together. And he's the example of a father that I never had in my life for my children. And he's a gift to me from my Father in heaven. So I'm just feeling really grateful. I'm also finding out that I'm seen and I'm loved just as I am. I don't have to strive. I'm learning to be more like Mary and less like Martha, and resting and just trusting in the Lord. And I'll close with this. Luke 12:29 says, "Don't strive for what you should eat and what you should drink, and don't be anxious, for the Gentile world eagerly seeks all these things, and your Father knows them. But first seek his kingdom, and these things shall be provided for you."